Now that we have seen from a bird's eye perspective how the server-side projects work, let's now focus a bit deeper on more functionality and see how it's implemented in ASP.NET Zero. Most of this we will be looking in the next demo and also when we build the full application in the next module. ASP.NET Zero uses Entity Framework Core code first, meaning that we will be creating the entities in our code first and then, through a migration, we will have the database being updated. We'll have, of course, a context for the application that acts as the traffic agent between the code and their underlying database. Handling exceptions is something that typically a lot of developers will struggle with. We need to make sure that the client-side application also handles exceptions from the server side gracefully. Both sides of this story are included in ASP.NET Zero out of the box. That means that you as a developer will typically not have to worry about all this. Another hot item that is always the subject of debate in a project is authorization. ASP.NET Zero has its own built-in authorization system which is based on permissions. The class that we'll look at later is the App Authorization Provider, which defines all permissions in the application. ASP.NET Zero uses caching. By default, it will use in-memory caching. However, for a larger system, a distributed cache might be a better solution. In that case, Redis is a good candidate. In ASP.NET Zero, it's very simple to enable the use of Redis since the support is already built in. By default, ASP.NET Zero uses Log4net for its built-in logging system. Indeed, also logging on the server side is built in the way it should, just like with all features we've covered so far. No need for you to invest time in investigating how to add the framework to your architecture. ASP.NET Zero has support for background task work using a default background job manager. However, it's easy to swap it out for another one, namely Hangfire. Throughout the application, mapping between types will need to happen, well, quite a few times. Think of entities from the database being mapped to DTOs, mappings between DTOs, and so on. The industry standard framework for this task is Automapper, which is used in ASP.NET Zero quite extensively. We've already touched briefly on application services, and in the demo you will be building an application service. Application services will basically be used to expose logic to the presentation layer, so in our case the API, and this way to the client. Next to application services, ASP.NET Zero also has domain services. The latter we won't be using in the demo in this tutorial, however it's interesting to know what they are. In more complex application domains, domain services will contain the business logic and business rules. These are part of the DDD implementation in ASP.NET Zero. ASP.NET Zero also contains a lot of base classes that we can use while building our applications with the framework. For example, when we will be building an application service, we can inherit from the app service base class. And since we are working with APIs, we'll need to ensure that the calls from the client to the API can be authenticated. A typical way to do this is using tokens issued by the server. When making a call from the client, the token needs to be sent along with the request via the header. The server can then validate the token and deny access if the token is invalid, or redirect the request to the authentication endpoint.